Today I'm going to be talking about archetypes, but also I'm going to be using a Jewish framework for transformation, transmutation. I like archetypes, even though most of the ones that I'll be sharing today, if not all, are male, masculine. For someone like me, it's very helpful because I didn't grow up with a very healthy role model that I'm not really protesting, but I have found that a lot of my work as a woman in the world has been to feel kind of that which my father couldn't provide: comforted, reassured, validated. And I'm not unawares that, the majority of people I meet are also struggling with very similar unmet needs, and that the same is true for men with their mothers. And it's also possible that if you've watched any other videos of mine, you'll know that I also suffered at the hand of my mother, at the eye of my mother, at the heart of my mother. So this doesn't mean I don't love them and respect them. This means that I've had to have invisible role models on the way to fill in the blanks where my parents hadn't been educated or capable or unlimited enough to be for me what I needed in the passages. So I look into the Jewish framework for these, and there's lots of categories to look at, and I'm going to go into now what is called Hasidus. But before I do that, I did a prompt yesterday. Sometimes it's good to check in because a lot of the stuff I'm sharing is stuff I've learned a year, 2 years ago. Could be longer, and so I try to keep it always relevant by continuing to do this work, this very same work that healed me and helped me, saved me last year, 2 years ago, and even longer. It's got to be relevant now too. So I'll start by saying, how do I know I've changed? In my class yesterday, a workshop called Living Deeply, we reflected on the last 10 or so months, and I'm looking at the ways I've changed as feeling more at home in myself, growing gratitude and confidence, talking to myself nicely and respecting my softness, feeling sexy in my movements and my rhythm rather than just as observed appearance that could be approved of, making more yummy food for myself, not taking people's opinions of me as seriously. That's a big one for me. Letting someone I miss be with me already in my mind. That's how I recognize them as one of my people. So my soulmates are already inside of me. They're connected to my soul, which is a part of which I am already. So kind of letting that integrate. Using my preventative medicine and practices with more grace and fun. So instead of turning it into this harsh routine I have to do perfectly. Demobilizing, releasing the rush. So this is just letting myself catch up. This is wisdom, right? Just using fear appropriately, using love appropriately. Singing and dancing, even just a few minutes. And finally, not feeling jealous when I'm practicing acceptance of myself and my performance. So I see I'm not looking that anyone has more than me or has something I want, because I recognize everything good is bad. Everything bad is good. Everything that has benefits also has cons. Everything that has cons also has benefits. So yeah. And I'm going to go into some of these frameworks and also talk a little bit about what is called Hasidus. Hasidus, as I've mentioned probably if you've heard, is about this idea of sharing, growing, yielding, the flow of life constantly. Not that I'm in dissatisfaction, there's not enough and there needs to be a power struggle. I need to say no. I need boundaries. I need recognition. There's no something wrong. It's living in the state of being that everything's fine and actually being godliness. So it's a state of oneness that is able to connect with the state of oneness that's always becoming one, which means there's always more. One can always become two. So it's always in the process of creating. And we say also that without this energy of there's always of this action or mentality based freedom in sharing and nurturing and giving and loving, being unconditional even when it feels conditional, then the wisdom or the flow of the pathways into the light of our whole temple or body clothing can't occur properly. So we might say I'm so wise, but if you're not actually able to let everybody be a guest exactly who they are in the world, And, if you feel like you're meant to judge people, I'm guilty of this. I'm dealing often with a judgmental nature. I come from the power struggle. I come from unconditional. I come from where you have to discard somebody because, you have the right to say no and you have no control, so may as well tell the person they're to blame, and then you feel better you did something about it. Like, a lot of these kind of petty ways of interacting, counting, not being able to admit that I'm being helped, that sharing is also receiving, a lot of that stuff. So now I'm going to go into what did the teacher say about it. So first of all, I spoke about archetypes. So I will say the 6 wisest are considered Yehoshua ben Adam, Avraham, Joseph, Moses, Yehoshua, and Shlomo. Buried in the portal to Eden is the burial spot which Avraham bought. And he found out that Adam and Chava were already in there. That was their burial place, Adam and Eve. And so Avraham and his wife Sarah, Yitzhak and his wife Rivka, and then Yaakov and his wife Leah. Now, he was meant to have Rachel, and also he had 2 handmaids from Rachel and Leah. They were sisters. They're called sometimes the entangled sisters in people who study quantum theory, because, 1 wife versus 2. But he got his brother's portion in the blessings, and many will say that he also got his brother's portion with Leah, who had 6 sons and almost had a 7th. And then the other 2 handmaids had 2 each, and then Rachel only had almost 1, but then Leah basically prayed that her 7th should be turned into a girl, and that was Dinah, who I definitely identify with. She was born to be a boy, but out of compassion for her sister, her mother said, out of her mother's compassion for her own sister, said, my daughter Dinah, before she was a daughter, said, my soon-to-be child should be a boy, should be a girl. And then Rachel was conceiving at the same time, actually had a boy instead of a girl, and that was Joseph. Joseph was her first son, and he was born as quite feminine, and Dinah was said to be born as quite masculine. So this is something that teaches me a lot. And so I will continue now and say Achia Hashiloni was this from Shiloh, right? Achia is almost like my brother. Achi, the brother of God. Hashiloni, the Shilonite, when there was a tabernacle, and he was a prophet and an anointer and very blessed. And he taught the Baal Shem Tov, who started Chassidus. He also taught King David and Elijah the prophet. Elijah may have been the metamorphosis from Pinchas, who killed those who were sexually immoral at the time of a plague, and the plague stopped. It says that the Jewish God, right, the God, everyone can have a personal relationship with God, and that he hates sexual immorality. And I like to think, I can't have sex with God. If I'm not having sex for the sake of oneness in the world, then I'm just loving the power of pleasure instead of the power of love bringing me pleasure. And there are 7 beloveds. And now I'm going to move into things from Rabbi Kamen runs this class at a community center near where I live now. I didn't used to live there, but I still went for the classes. They were every week. I went when I could. And he also has them online. And then there's also the Tanya, written by the one who took over after the Baal Shem Tov's successor. So there was the Maggid, the speaker, who went around, and then there was the Alter Rebbe, who was they call him the Grand Master. The Baal Shem Tov was the master of the good word, and so there's this very, very esteemed lineage. And anyway, so the 7 beloveds, the spiritual shepherds, nourishers, luminaries, or the Ishpizin, like the rabbis, the teachers, the guides, is Abraham, Yitzchak, Yaakov, the 3 patriarchs, Moshe and Aaron, his brother, Yosef, one of the 12 tribes, and David. In a book called Faith, Love, and Joy about the Baal Shem Tov, Howard Cohen found a source that says actually they are Methuselah, Adam, Seth, his son, Abraham, Yaakov, David, and Moshe. So there's, this idea of 7. I spoke about 7 yesterday. It's a great video. You can handle me doing my facial yoga, which is very bizarre. you could see afterward how blessed we are with such great information. The 7, about 7. And now I'm going to also speak about, so after the Alter Rebbe, then you have the Mittler Rebbe. So somebody who took over after him, he wrote Torah's Chaim on the first 2 books of the 5 books of Moses, or the Torah. Torah's Chaim means the truth of life, the life truth. And his name was Dov Ber, which is like bear, like a mama bear, like a bear. And he married somebody named Shena. His last name was Shnei Uri, from his father, which means 2 lights. He had 2 sons, 7 daughters. He had 19 works published. And he was the 9th of Kislev, which is like the month of Christmas, Hanukkah time. In the winter time, he died at 54 on his own birthday. And he had interesting, that's 9, 5 and 4. And he also had 9 children. And then Yud Kislev, the 10th, he was freed from jail before a trial. And if you look and you say 10th of Kislev and 9th of Kislev, that's 19. And he had 19 works published. So I thought that was interesting. And now I'm going to go into some of this deeper stuff. I'm going to go between the Tanya and Rabbi Kamen. And he studies Chassidus, which is sichos, which are like speeches or articles written by, or spoken by some of these grand masters. So life is creative force for the spark being created. Divine compassion comes from the fact that we don't know. And so there's this innate dignity that emanates from being the creator, being part of the creator. We don't know. We don't have to know yet. We just are. It's not like you know that you're worthy of love. So this is the unconditional. And we're moving toward or away our divine sparkness by having 13 ways to combine it. So there's this love and fear. And it's like love and fear is like kindness and severity. So I spoke about chesed and gvura, right? This shearing, this merging of the boundaries, and then this like attaching or restricting, restraining, unconditional and conditional, and they're in balance. And giving or desiring without a human match means to turn to the creator inside the body. And there's the serpent outside, so it's like there's this connection to the creator, and there's like this energy of the serpent flowing, and the serpent of the body, right? So it's like we're stuck in this thing that we keep shedding. It's a shell, and we keep shedding it, but yet sometimes the shell gets us really tight, and it's like we're glued to identifications, to habits, and we can no longer freely move like as we're flowing in the creator spirit spark. So it's like a rope or a snake, and we grasp, like now we can start to think of it as like there's level of 3 here. There's a conduit, a fuel, and a vessel. So conduit, fuel that the conduit can burn from, and a vessel. We would say with a candle or a lamp, there's a wick, there's cup, which is the vessel, and then the oil, which is the fuel. We could say in the level of the soul, these 3 are unified. Or one of the levels of the soul, these 3 are unified. So the Torah, which is the truth, which is the, we'd say it's the wisdom of God, it needs mitzvos. And mitzvos are operations. This is like the will of God. And it needs to latch on. The wick needs the conduit, right? And then it can illuminate. It first needs to grasp a filament it can hold on to. So there's the commandment and the connection. And then there's like what conduit from where? From this creative spark, which comes into the body, which is like, you could say it's like emanating from above. But you could say we're upside down. Our feet are above. It's still emanating from above. Whatever you would like to say. It's emanating into the highest level of ourselves. And it's got ratzon, which is the will, and the chachma, which is the wisdom, right? So the Torah and the mitzvah. And it brings pleasure. So this is like, in order to be in pleasure, not to suffer, this is how to do that. There's this idea of this, like, now we're talking about fire, to go a little deeper into it. There is spiritual smelt. It's extraction at a designated temperature of what you want, of the desirable, from a composite, which is called dross. And it's for spiritual purification. Prevention medicine, right? So how do we not have to deal with this undesirable? So we spoke about extracting what you want at a certain temperature, handling the heat. The love comes. It's at the threshold where it's the hardest to love. That's where the love is awakened. It's at the threshold where it's hardest not to escape the body. That's where it's awakened, the strength. So the strength and the love come from this like fire, right? The conduit, and this rope the shell gets taken away, where the rope of ourself can move freely. But on the other side of it, how do we keep the rope moving freely? And it's like there's two things. One is creatively giving credit and consideration all the time. All the time, I deserve credit. All the time, I deserve consideration. All the time, you deserve credit. All the time, you deserve consideration. And in life, and all the people in it, including me, become new again when I'm willing to be kissed and embraced by the Creator. What does that mean? Kisses of the mouth of God. We would say in our speech, right? For example, we become enlivened by what we're saying. We are envisioning, we're engulfed by mentally, and we're embodied. All of these are possible through our words. So what does it mean through our kiss? Like, there's a conduit here for everything to become new again. To become new again and again is not to hold on, not to identify strongly. So prevention medicine here is to constantly be embraced by the newness, to feel so loved and good as I am, even though it's like, even though it's new, and I don't know who I was, and it's scary. What's coming out at this heat, at this temperature, this pressure, this strain, is actually the most delicious nuggets of manifested spirit. Whether you're craving certain outcomes or not, the most amazing pleasure for you can come from staying in the Creator. And that's where I'm at, and that's what I can share today. And I'll finish with a few things from some friends of mine. One is my friend Michelle. She says, let people penetrate their own selves. We all have to do that. She says, giving away my blessings takes my self-respect. And finally, purity and cleanliness helps create a dwelling place for the divine. So as we penetrate into ourselves, this candle, this wick, it penetrates into the fuel, right? Each one has to do it for themselves. Nobody can have you see yourself through their eyes. It might be tempting, but you've got to see yourself at that high temperature. You've got to be your own witness. And it goes without much explanation, but giving away blessings takes away self-respect, because we think we're not worthy of our own blessings. And if we're constantly renewed, then we're always worthy. We're constantly worthy of credit and consideration, remember? And also, like, if we want to not get too stuck in habits, we need to keep purifying. What does that mean? It means we keep melting away. We keep cleansing. Water is a kind of fire too, because it like washes away everything that's not fixed, right? And fire like melts it away. Water like melts it away. So we make this dwelling place for the divine nature, which is always changing. And my friend David Schwecke says something, and I'm saying this because I'm struggling a little with my self-esteem. Today there's like hairs I grow on my chin, and hairs I grow over here, and hairs I grow that go in the middle, and hairs I grow a few here, and I grow hair on my armpits, and so much hair on my inner thighs, and so much pubic hair, and like thick dark hair on my legs, and even on my navel, like my belly button. And so my friend David Schwecke said King David loved hairy women. In fact, at that time, only the Jews shaved their private parts, but he liked women who were hairy. How did he know that it was good? Is that their sons came out so sexy, big and strong and masculine that these women had like stronger life energy, vitality of the body, that he used to send them to the front of the battle to scare their enemies, and they wouldn't even have to fight. He just sent them there to scare the enemies. He would say, look at my offspring. If this is my offspring, can you imagine? So in other words, some men look at women and say, I want what you have, even if I'm walking around thinking I'm not attractive. And it's true also because, with Jacob, he had 2 handmaids, and they had concubine mothers. They looked different. They looked a little different than the other 2 sisters. They were not from the same. And so, for example, I'll give an example with God and Asher, number 9 and 10, because I spoke about the Mittler Rebbe, 9 and 10. So I'll say God and Asher. God is 9. He had concubine mother. God was very strong. He would, with such force, when he was fighting, he was such an amazingly talented individual that he could navigate that. He would cut someone into a whole body with a sword. In wars, may there be no more wars, if God wills. And Asher, number 10, he had the best oil, the most beautiful woman. He had this kind of luck of good taste and being blessed with abundance. So, kind of to wrap this up, I will say, if you think of who I'm really complaining to when I say about the hair, I'm saying that my mother was born with her eggs, right? And Cain and Hevel were the eggs inside of Eve before she left the garden. They were actually before she left the garden, before the sin. So in the mitochondrial lineage, it's like recognizing, does the fire burn away this foreign DNA we have that looks at ourselves with criticism and looks at others with criticism, the prophet Bilam versus Moshe, there's like the refinement. I spoke about the snake. We could refine through the snake. Bilam was a prophet who tried to hurt and cause harm to the Jews, and Moshe tried to help. And neither one was Moshe was not in Egypt. He escaped. He was actually brought up in Pharaoh's palace, the ruler of the whole Egypt. And then he left, and then he came back and saved his people. He left when he was a baby. Meanwhile, Bilam was trying to find any way to curse them, and he couldn't. He still had to bless them. So it's like one of them is a psychic fire, and one of them is a spiritual fire. We would say the snake versus refinement. And finally, I'll end with, because I spoke about David a lot. His lineage, we know is the Messiah, according to the Jewish tradition, comes from King David, and this is the lineage of Judah. And in the time of the Messiah, they say Yosef and Judah will become like one staff. So you had Boaz, who was from this, Bilam was connected to Balak. So Balak was the king who hired Bilam to curse the Jews because he made so many sacrifices to God, believing God is the highest God, even though he's trying to curse his people. He didn't quite put together that his chosen people were the ones he was trying to curse. At that time, this is the way that the story is told. And so he actually merited that his ancestry lineage, so his descendant Ruth would be of David, and she did marry Boaz. Boaz said, Hashem is with me, and that was his way. So now, wrapping this together, what does it mean God is with me? I said, give ourselves credit, consideration. We got to keep changing. I said we need archetypes. We need to transform. Ultimately, we're always connected to it, but it can feel very far. So we strive, we aim to attain. We make futile progress, but we're like hares. We have to follow the path towards the root or the bulb, right? We go back up, we follow the path to the bulb, to the root, and we see how near it really is all along, and how the end has the greatest potential for growth, right? All this is growth out of it. And this is how we have our relationship with others. We try something new every time. We give space and time to let it refresh, right? We see the wholeness. We remember all the good parts, even in the bad. And this relationship starts with ourselves, right? We stay in possibilities. We remember that tzaddik, a righteous one, falls 7 times before they rise. We give a strong sense of self that is not dependent on the variables. We say just who you are. Not like because you do this or that. It's resilience. It's the ability to bounce back, and it's confidence, even to be able to ask for help. And, there's 2 kinds of darknesses. One is protecting us from dissolution, and one is concealing the light. So one protects from us melting away, right? Sometimes the fire is too strong, and sometimes it conceals the light so that we could get adjusted to seeing in the dark. There are 2 types of headlamps, light works, right? One is it elevates up to the bright. It lights it so we could see up there. It shines the light. The other brings it down. It's like a reflector. So it's a bright reflector that we could see what. It's like a headlamp. It shines in front by bringing down what was lit up. And we could think of that as like 2 mirrors or something, right? And how they made a periscope out of it where you could see around corners, right? You could see what's not right in front of you. And then, because light curves, we understand this in quantum mechanics, that light curves when it's faster than the speed of, when there's gravity on top of its own speed, because its speed is constant. So it's constantly moving at a speed, and then you add force, that's when we do light work. That's when things start to curve and change their direction. So when we go above and beyond that threshold, light actually curves. We actually bring the light at the end of the tunnel here and now. And then 2 sanctuaries or accompanyings is to only see God or to bitterly thirst for God. And that's to know the perfection's always there. So I thank you for spending this time with me. And I hope that it wasn't too all over the place, but I wanted to like kind of keep it a little bit more cerebrally fluid today. And I also shared some of my personal stuff. So I hope that it was helpful, and I wish you well. Thank you. Bye.